Hi, I'm Dale, and this is my new YouTube channel all about picking and selling on eBay. In this video, I wanted to show you some of my favorite sales since 2016. Some of them because of the big profit margins, and others just because I thought they were really cool items. Picking can be a lot of fun, and hopefully these items give you some ideas about what to look for when you're out there picking. So here's a few of my favorites. What do you want for that? So first up, I've got this brass hand mirror with a nude lady relief on the handle. After 4 years of doing this, I've developed an eye for brass pieces. I just like them. It's not gold or silver, but I like it. And I was a little disappointed when I got it home. It was only worth about $10 or $12. There was a number of them listed. They seemed to sell pretty consistently, so I wasn't worried about selling it. But it was $10 to $12. But I noticed that mine had a red velvet backing on it, and all the others had green. So I pointed that out in the listing, and I marked it up to $20. I figure if they're selling like 4 or 5 a month, it's only going to take one person to prefer red over green. And since it was the only red one, a lot of people would want it just for that reason. And so sure enough, it sold for $20 in about 8 days. It was pretty good. Paid $3, made $20 on it. So next up we have this Marantz cassette recorder. Now normally I don't like cassette players. I think they're cheap. And usually they don't work. You have to replace the belts in them. But this one had a few things going for it. First of all, it's Marantz. If you see the name Marantz, don't be so quick to walk by because it's probably worth money. The second thing it had going for it is it was a field recorder. It wasn't your standard run-of-the-mill portable cassette player. So this thing had a VU meter on it, an analog meter. It had an XLR microphone input, professional grade input. And it records in mono. Now you wouldn't think that would be a plus, but that's the way the field recorders were back in the day. So it could have been used for news broadcast or anything. The guy that I bought it from said he used it to record Grateful Dead concerts back in the day. I think back in the 70s. And this thing, it had a metal housing. It was very well built. Everything checked out when I bought it, and I checked it more extensively when I got it home. And when I did the listing, you put in there everything you tested it for, and that'll give people a lot of confidence in buying it. So I picked that up for $25 and sold it for $225. And it sold in 1 day. That's one of my favorite listings of all time. Here we have a vintage Miller padlock. There wasn't a whole lot of profit on this one either, but I thought it was a very cool item. I've watched a lot of them go by at auction, and I finally got one at a reasonable price. I'm thinking it's about 100 years old, and it's just amazing to look at it close up and hold it in your hand and imagine some guy coming around with the key and unlocking it back in the day. It was a different time. But I picked it up for $13.75 and sold it for $30. It took 592 days to sell this one. Fortunately, it wasn't very big. Here I've got a power supply assembly board taken from a Tascam 38 reel-to-reel recorder. I've shipped one of these recorders before, and they're very difficult to ship because it's very big and heavy, and it has some very delicate tape guides on the front. So you have to protect those tape guides from the weight of the deck. So in this case, I decided to just piece it out because it would be easier in terms of shipping. And you usually make more money that way as well. So I paid a total of $150 for the deck. And then what I did was I prorated all the pieces that I listed. So I figure I paid $6 for this, and it sold for $60. It was a nice profit, and it sold in 272 days. By the time it's all said and done, I expect to get in excess of $1,000 for all the parts that came out of it. This is another item from that same Tascam recorder. This was the right reel motor. After prorating, I figure I paid about $5 for it, and it brought in $75. It took 290 days to sell it. So I put together a list in a spreadsheet of all the items that have sold so far from that Tascam 38. And you can see so far the total has come to $1,420. I'm actually very happy with that. So looking down the list, there's some clamp adapters. They were $27.50 each. The real table was $55, and there were 2 of those somewhere. The table drum, $48. There was 2 of those. Just a little head cover from the recording heads was $75. Look, the head stack, the recording heads, went for $150, and the biggest one was the capstan motor, was $175. And then there's maybe another $150 worth of parts that haven't sold yet. And after that, I still have all the leftover stuff that I wasn't even sure it was worth, listing them. I wasn't sure if they would sell. But I could probably put those together in one lot, call it a Tascam 38 carcass, and sell it for, I don't know, $50, $100. I'm not sure. But I got a good amount of money out of that. Very happy. Now here we have one of the infamous Singer Featherweight sewing machines. It's just a little machine, but with a big reputation. They say they sell so fast. And I always wanted one of these. And I almost forgot that I had one because it sold so quick. But I picked it up at auction for $100 and sold it for $200 in less than a day. I almost forgot I even had that. But it was cool to sell one of those. And you'll notice in that last picture that I included a PDF printout of the owner's manual. I was actually able to find it online. And whenever you can include a little something extra that nobody else is including, it gives you an edge. You can actually charge a little bit more because you've got that. And they'll be more likely to click on you because, oh, this one has a manual, when most of them don't. So it's always worth the time. And I go to a website called manualslib.com. There's a little shout out to them. I'm able to find 95% of the manuals I'm looking for on that site. It's manualslib.com. It's a free site, so go check them out. Okay, now next up we've got this pair of vintage brass Cherub table lamps. All right, there was a nice profit on these lamps. And when I got them home, they were branded L&L. So whenever there's a brand on there, they're going to be worth more money. The detail on these was just amazing. And after you get to look at this stuff for a while, you'll start to appreciate it. And there are definitely buyers on eBay who appreciate it, and it will bring in the big money. So they're brass cherubs with cut glass globes and prisms hung around the outside. Now there were a few defects in there. I had to replace a couple of the wires on the prisms, and I think one of the prisms was actually a replacement. But on a set of lamps like this, that's not going to matter a whole lot. And also, there was a pair of them. That was the real kicker. If somebody wants some nice vintage lamps for their living room because they have a lot of vintage furniture and they see there's a pair of these, oh man. So they sold, I paid $16.52, and they sold for $400 in 6 days. And I got these at auction, and I think everybody just overlooked them. Nobody wanted to turn them over and read the branding. They wrote them off. And I have made a lot of money on specialty lighting. If it's just a common everyday table lamp, I don't even bother. And everybody goes for the Tiffany stuff, so you can never compete on that. But stuff like this, or any kind of specialty LED lighting that just looks odd, look it up. It could be very much worth your while. All right, this is a ham radio by ICOM, model V8000. I picked this up at an estate sale. I was a little worried about listing this because I wasn't able to fully test it. You're not legally allowed to transmit on these things unless you have a license. And from what I've read, the FCC can triangulate your signal and come knocking on your door. But I was able to just key up the mic and hear the inbound audio drop out of the way. And that was enough for me to have confidence that it was working. I was able to receive signals, although there aren't many people out there transmitting. But I was confident that everything was good and it sold and there was no problem. I picked it up for $10. It sold for $150 in one day. And here's another ham radio that came out of the same estate sale. This one's a YAESU FT-8800R. I paid $18 for this one. It sold for $230 in less than 24 hours. And again, you'll notice I'm printing out PDF copies of the owner manuals because I just love to include them. It makes a difference. This is a vintage set of Walden Warchester Sockets. I got these at an estate sale. I wasn't really sure what I had here, but I knew they were old and there was a lot of pieces there. I had to do some research. I think maybe all of the sockets were there, but there was a few extensions that were missing. And there wasn't a whole lot to go on as far as comps. So in the end, I just rounded it off to 100 and listed it. I paid $6.75. I got $100 and it sold in a day. Okay, this is an Insteon light switch. There wasn't a whole lot of profit here, but the reason I like this one is just because it was so easy. I picked it up at a thrift store for $3.18. It was brand new in the box, so I didn't have to test it, and it just slides into a bubble mailer and it's gone. It sold in 5 days. It was just a nice, tidy, easy little profit. Next up, we have this Ion drum rocker controller module for Xbox. This was part of a whole drum kit for Xbox, and it's another example of an item I decided to piece out. It didn't have all the parts, so I'm not sure how much I would have gotten for it. Maybe $150, $200 at the most. But I pieced it out. For this controller, I prorated the cost at $3.18, and it brought me $70 in 25 days. Here's one of the drums from that same Ion kit. This was the green drum. And let's see, I prorated the price on that at 91 cents, and it sold for $25 in 20 days. And this was a Cymbal Boom from the same kit. For this part, I prorated it at 136. It sold for $30 in 10 days. Here's a list of all the items out of that drum set that I've sold so far. And you can see from the top right number, so far I've brought in $409. Here's a list of all the parts from that drum set that haven't sold yet. So there's close to another $180 there. So even if none of these sell, I've still doubled what I thought I was going to get selling the incomplete set as one item. Whenever you have something that you buy that's missing pieces and it's kind of large and it would be a pain in the neck to ship it, just consider piecing it out. It's definitely going to be worth more money that way. Doesn't hurt to take a look. Okay, now check this out. This is a Browning hunting knife. Now, when I first started doing eBay, I was going to my neighborhood auction, and one day they had a collection of knives at an estate auction. And that collection of knives brought out a bunch of guys that I had never seen there before. And when they started auctioning off these knives, those guys were like sharks in the water. Those knives were selling for hundreds of dollars a piece. And I learned a big lesson that day. There's a lot of knife collectors out there, and they have big collections, and they spend big money on them. The only knife I was able to get that day was a beat-up old knife that nobody else wanted. I got it for $10. But it was a Gerber, and it had a little pouch with a sharpening stone on it. And that knife brought over $100 on eBay. And this was the one that nobody wanted. Okay? So if you're out at yard sales and you see a knife with a brand name on it, check it out. These knives are works of art built by artisans. You will learn to appreciate them. I paid $5 for this one at a yard sale. It sold for $120 in 3 days. All right, I'm going to close it out with this one. This is just a little artist easel. I picked this up at an estate sale that had ended for the day, and they put up a Craigslist ad that everything was free. And this was one of the items I got. So it cost me nothing. It sold for $30, and it sold in 5 days. So that wraps it up for this video. I would encourage you to always keep an open mind when you're out there picking. And while it's always good to specialize in one or two categories, you don't want to walk away from big profits just because you're not familiar with something. Some of my favorite picks were initially outside of my comfort zone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.